Hello and welcome to another episode of Growing Up B2B. I'm your host, Ed Delia, second generation president of Delia Associates, the growth advisory and activation firm focused exclusively on family owned B2B companies. And today I'm joined by Jared Kassoff, chief operating officer of Resolution Capital Management. Jared represents the third generation of a real estate family whose roots trace back to one of New Jersey's most respected commercial real estate developers. But unlike many family business stories, Jared wasn't simply handed an established operating company. Instead, he inherited something different: a legacy, a portfolio of properties, and the opportunity to build a modern business while honoring those who came before him. Today, Resolution Capital Management has evolved into a vertically integrated real estate company providing property management, construction management, investment, and advisory services, with a focus on serving an often overlooked segment of commercial real estate market. What makes Jared's story especially compelling is the balance between stewardship and entrepreneurship, respecting the past while building something entirely new for the future. Jared, welcome to Growing Up B2B.
Thanks, Ed. I don't even know if I have to go anymore. I think you just gave my whole story. It's perfect. What he said.
I'm sure you'll say it better. And to that end, for our listeners who may not be familiar with Resolution Capital Management, now say it in your own words. What's the company all about, and what makes it unique?
Yeah, Resolution Capital Management was built to be a boutique, customizable, full service real estate platform. And that's a lot of buzzwords for basically saying we are property managers, general contractors, owners, operators, asset managers, everything real estate, we are here. We kind of built ourselves to, be serving people like us. So we focus on that kind of middle markets, somewhat forgotten segment of the real estate world, which is, your high net worth individuals, family offices, somebody, group of investors, or somebody that has amassed a nice portfolio that may not get the attention of that larger shop, but
Mhm.
is kind of outgrown that smaller shop, the two guys in a truck, as I like to call it, guys or girls, sorry.
So you fit a nice segment of the market that maybe is either underappreciated or maybe underserved, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Nice. So you're a third generation leader, but you've often described, like in our past conversations, as your journey is one of rebuilding rather than inheriting. So talk about that. What did you inherit and what did you have to build from scratch? Because your situation is a little bit unique.
It is unique. Inherit. I inherited a name and a legacy and a reputation, especially here in town. I moved back from New York and New Jersey, where my grandfather was, but back to DC, where I'm also a third generation Washingtonian. And having that reputation and the ability to ask my parents questions. They've been doing this for a long time here. Having that knowledge and some of that institutional knowledge and experience in real estate. I inherited that. I inherited a platform, an opportunity. And when I say platform, it was a portfolio that I got to work on that was dating back to some buildings that my grandfather might have built. And those opportunities to kind of take what was there and build it better.
Mhm.
And so that building from scratch, I think that we look a lot today like what my grandfather's company had originally looked like. He was that full service, property manager, general contractor, investor, and it kind of came together and built again in a way that was self-serving and then started to go out to third-party clients.
Mhm.
And that skipped the generation, when he had unfortunately passed away somewhat unexpectedly. My parents were living down here and they looked at themselves and said, we have our day jobs. This is not something we want to run in New Jersey. We've built a life here. We've built careers here. And they spent a number of years unwinding that. And so there were some legacy portfolio, some properties that he had built that we stayed involved in. And that opportunity kind of gave me the jump start to rebuild what he had kind of done and what this business had looked like.
Interesting. So you kind of went back to your grandfather's playbook in a way. You kind of went back two generations to say, all right, what was it? And can it be that again? And if so, how do we reimagine it for the now?
Yeah. Look, and I think it's not exactly identical, or maybe I hope I'm doing what he would have been doing. but yeah, I mean, we've added our twist. I'm certain that he would be mind blown about what Claude and ChatGPT and some of the other tools that we use today are. But even looking through some of his old files, I mean, there's tenants in this portfolio that have been here longer than I've been alive, and I'm
Wow.
still working on that. So,
Wow.
I think that's unique. That's interesting. But in the rebuilding, I think we're more focused on bringing this to third-party clients more than they did. They were a lot more self-serving and owner managed, owner operator focused.
So sadly, he passed. I believe you were still quite young when your grandfather passed. And while you never really had the chance to work alongside him, talk a bit about your grandfather in the way that certainly there was a little influence. There were some stories. There's things that
Yeah.
you're kind of discovering as you go back in time and go through records of old tenants or old
Yeah.
transactions. Talk a little bit, Jared, about how your grandfather's kind of showing up in your life now, even though he's passed on.
Other than being a Giants fan growing up in DC, which I can thank him for, it's really funny. So I knew my grandfather had an unbelievable reputation in his community just from philanthropy and the way that he was involved and the way that he showed up in his community. He was born and raised in Jersey. He was deeply involved until the day that he passed away in the community and all aspects of that community. And I knew that because when I, went to his and my grandmother's funerals, it was an unbelievable turnout. And I just knew the type of person and personality that he was, even, and he passed away, like you said, when I was in about sixth grade, I think. So you have this vision of your grandfather, right? And like I have those memories, and I remember him as being my grandfather and that kind of community figure, the guy
Mm,
that he was and that my grandmother was. And it's funny that, I didn't really know much about his professional career or anything about what he had built until way, way down the road. And I was actually working in real estate in New York, and I was out with my boss at a networking event. And my boss had introduced me to someone at the network event and was like, this is Herb Iris's grandson, and he's now working for me in brokerage. And the guy looked at me and he was like, oh, like I know Herb. I worked with Herb, and I worked with Dow Realty, and I worked with Dow Associates and Lester and all of his partners, and I remember them all the way back to Newark, New Jersey. And I was like, well, that was the first time I think the like light bulb it's clicked for me. I was like, this guy, I don't know, 23 years old working in New York now, guy I'd never met before, knows my grandfather, knows what some of the stuff that he had built and worked on. And that I think that sparked kind of like a curiosity in what he had built and what he had done. And that led me to kind of go back and have some conversations with my parents. Um, and again, like real estate had always been something I grew up with around the table. Both my parents were involved. My mom was a transactional attorney, for large law firms in New York and in DC, working on real estate transactions. And my dad has been at Wilkes Artist for almost 40 years now. So real estate was like a part of our conversations, but I never had really focused in on what he had done professionally. And I was a
mm,
college kid and whatever else. You don't really like focus on your grandparents other than being like, yeah, he was a Giants fan, he was a Jersey guy, right? Like he's fun with me at the beach, but like he wasn't there. I never got to sit down with him. And like
yeah,
you said before, now sitting down and looking at some of his notes and getting to dive into his files and even go back through stuff that he had on his desk. And, it's unbelievable that some of this still exists and I'm still working on it.
yeah, yeah. It's always intriguing to kind of do those trips down memory lane. And I have some legacy files and things that I've held on to of my dad's, and it's very intriguing, through a slightly more mature lens to go back and think, what was he thinking at that moment? And,
Yeah.
where was his mindset at, and where was he going, and how was he thinking about it? And, wishing I could, just pick up the phone one more time and ask him,
It's an opportunity to see what they would have been doing, right? Like
Hmm.
how would he have thought about what we're building right now? How would he have thought about how I enter a negotiation with some of these tenants, or purchasing a building or going into a contracting negotiation, right? Like
Hmm.
it gives me a look in a sense of like, yeah, I never got to sit with him and know exactly what he would have done. Some of that's been passed down by my parents. But it gives me an opportunity to feel like I know what he would have been working on or what he would have done.
Hmm.
And that's really cool. It is being like able to pick up the phone one more time and be like,
Yeah.
what are we doing here? What should I do?
So you do have somebody that's a little bit closer in the here and now, and your mother, who was essentially the bridge between your generation, your grandfather, in many ways preserving, the portfolio of assets across her span with the company. Um, so when you think about your mom, what are some takeaways from your mom that have imparted on you and your leadership style, Jared?
You know, I can't even begin to tell you the what she has done with the portfolio and the stewardship she's had to lose your father, unexpected, like very unexpectedly at a relatively young age. He died in 2006. This was 20 years ago. To lose your father then, she had worked for him in different capacities, but you don't really prepare for that. And you don't really prepare to, steward a legacy or shepherd this along. And being who he was and having that community, you know, um, involvement, that carries a lot of responsibilities. And then to take on something like this for 15 plus years before she got some support from me. My father obviously was there to help, and
Mhm.
she had obviously different people along the way helping her in this effort. But it's a totally different responsibility than what he was building. And what he was building, he certainly had a level of responsibility for his employees and for the company and building this thing that existed. But I'm not sure that even in his wildest dreams, he could have imagined that I'd be working on, whatever this is. Um, and she knew that, right? He was gone. She didn't have someone to go to. She didn't have that, partner to kind of bounce ideas off of. What did he want? What did he want his legacy to look like? What did he want this business to look like? And she kind of took her knowledge of him and ran with it for a very long
Mhm.
time. And that's a different set of responsibilities. Now
Mhm.
you've inherited something that you need to keep going. And it is a very different set of responsibilities and challenges and expectations. And so the job that she has done is unbelievable. And I
Mhm.
can't give her enough credit. And, my father too, who had his job and his law firm and is now president of Wilkes Artist, and his involvement. It's really cool to be able to work with your parents. Um, it's even cooler to be able to work with your parents when they're really good at what they do. It's
Mhm.
scary, it's challenging, uh, but two people who have a lot of experience and are really successful at what they do, it just brings you to another level, right?
Mhm.
So I can't commend them enough on what they have done, and I feel like I am talking to my grandfather in a lot of ways when I talk to them because I know that they're passing on what he would have done in his legacy, and she might not have worked with him, as closely in the day to day as we work together now, but I can see a lot of what he would have wanted coming through her.
Mhm. So, in your situation, and we talked about this before we got on, it's really um, unique, or I should say your journey, not your situation, in that you're third generation, but in many ways, because of how you're reimagining the company, you profile a little bit like a straddle between a founder-led and a third generation. So you're a
Yeah.
little of both. So, rather than being and your mom is a bit more of a classic Gen 2, which we tend to be stewards of the company
Yeah.
in many regards. Um, but rather than carrying that forward, you saw some opportunities to build new assets onto the platform. So talk about that for a minute. What did you see? What did you recognize to say, hey, this is a good idea to move in these directions? How were the gaps showing up that you said, I think we can fill these gaps and do so effectively?
Yeah. No, in her stewardship, it was carrying over a lot of the institutional knowledge
Hmm.
of the portfolio, the tenants, the platform, but there was no day-to-day operating company in the sense of like full service property management, that didn't
Yeah,
exist, right? He
yeah.
didn't have people working here that have been here for 25 years or 30 years, right? That was all lost when they kind of closed down Dow and had split from their partners. So, I joke about this on day one when I had finally convinced them that it was a good idea to restart this. I got to my office that we had leased in the middle of COVID, and I swear I was the only person looking for office space at that time. But I showed up and I didn't know what to do. I started putting together furniture and I was like, what do we do here? There was nothing. Got to plug in the phones. We got to plug in the computers. So it was a startup. We hired
Mm,
for the first time in 15 to whatever 20 years it had been since the company existed. And what does that look like? How do we staff? How do we have people do this? What are the operational procedures? It was all getting put into place for the very first time. So from that sense, it was an exciting journey because it was very entrepreneurial and startup in nature. And we would take our first couple meetings. We didn't even have a conference room or anything. We would sit on like wheel our chairs out into the middle of like the office and sit there and talk. And um, from that perspective, it certainly looks a lot different today than those first few weeks. I'm very proud of that. But the opportunity and the the portfolio and the opportunity to jump on that portfolio existed. And we had conversations in I think it was like the middle of COVID. I had been back living with them and my girlfriend and now wife. Um, and I like to think that they saw that I had become a bit of a real estate professional and a trusted somebody with some experience that they could talk to about this. And we started talking about, well, what does this look like? And I started asking more questions, and we had, 6 or 7 different property managers working, not communicating effectively through one platform. And my
Mm,
mom's expertise was really in that transactional. She's a lawyer, and
mhm,
contracts and negotiating and transactional piece. What we were missing was kind of that like hand-to-hand combat, day-to-day operations. How do we get through this? There was a lot of low-hanging fruit in the portfolio that could be done. Who is going to wrangle these property managers together and do this? And you start digging into the books, and you start looking at things, and you run into these natural issues that I think there inherently are with a third party property manager, general contractor, or an outside person that's not a part of that family business or family office. So I kind of
mhm.
convinced them to take a step back and like, let's look at this and like, what is this going to be? Is this going to go on for the next few generations? Is this, are we going to wind this down and sell everything and, everybody go their own ways? Like, what do you guys want this to be? What would have Herb wanted this to be? And if it was to continue building that, like, well, let's bring it back to what it looked like, because I think that operationally makes a lot more sense than what we're doing right now. And not that you guys haven't done an incredible job, but I could help out, I think. And they gave me an opportunity. My mom actually made a funny joke at our wedding that said, I looked at her at one point and she just said, I'm really excited about this and I'm proud of what we've done. And I said, what, you didn't think I could do this? And and she says, no, I knew you could, but like it's a big leap of faith. You're talking about changing your relationships with one another. You're talking about financial risk. You're talking about generational, the different
Yeah.
aspects of this. And it was a big risk. And I'm proud that they let me talk them into doing it.
Well, I'd have to think you made some very compelling arguments, and it sounds like you did.
I think so. I'm not sure they thought we would take it this far so far, and wait till they hear my plans for the next 10 years. Maybe they're not so set up for that or excited for that part, but it still takes some pulling them out of their comfort zone to do some things. And there's also a level of them being like, pump the brakes here, buddy. We've been doing this for a long time. You're getting ahead of yourself there.
And it would sound like, based on marketplace feedback, you know, your vision was on point because you're bringing this, multi-solution platform predominantly to the middle market, and it seems like they're receptive. Why would you say that segment has been kind of overlooked for so long? It would seem that there's lots of opportunity there. Clearly, there's lots of activity in your company across all the channels of your service lines. Why would you say the middle market sometimes gets kicked to the curb if that's true?
I think it's hard to do. Um, it's hard to do in the sense of property management is a scale business. You need a lot of business and it's very labor intensive. You need the right people.
Mhm.
So you have to get to that scale quickly, right? And if you're going to build that business, you can only be paying attention to so many things in that business at once. And property management is very, very involved day to day. I mean, you're talking about a lot of hand-to-hand combat. So to do that and do that effectively, but also care at the level of, thinking more like an asset manager is hard. It's just hard to
Mhm.
do. It requires a lot of focus. It requires hiring the right people. It requires having those processes and procedures in place that all systems are talking to each other, because you can get really, really bogged down in that day to day and just blocking and tackling all of the things that could pop up that you
Mm.
forget, what is my execution plan? What is my investment strategy? What are we thinking about, 3 to 5 years from now if I have to deal with something that's going on that needs to be fixed today? So I think it's really hard. You need a lot of resources. You need the right people. And I think that middle market segment, it's hard to find that balance between how can I scale this to a point where I'm making money, I'm profitable, and have the right people and right, I'm paying, my team and right, and the leadership that cares the way that we do. Um, and how do I bring that to this niche, right? I don't have the resources of a Lincoln or a JLL or a Cushman, right?
Yeah.
Not yet, at least. but we do have a lot more resources and institutional knowledge and experience more than, your two guys in a truck. And so being able to pack that into a boutique customizable offering, I think is really unique and why it's so underserved because DC, I think, is a phenomenal marketplace for that. I think it is heavily dominated by high net worth individuals, families, that go back generations that have significant assets in this area, investment groups that have put together a nice portfolio that are going to get the C or D or whatever team from one of these larger firms. And the smaller firms just don't offer that sophisticated institutional punch that they really need and deserve in a portfolio their size.
Yeah.
And I think that all of our, unique experiences, my mom coming from, being a lawyer and being a transactional attorney, mine coming from, that equity sales and trading kind of institutional investment banking side of things, and my dad coming at it from the real estate tax tertiary work that he was doing. I think all those perspectives are very unique, and you end up getting a lot of different perspectives in a property manager, which is really interesting and not there's not a lot like that out there.
Well, yeah, if I'm hearing you correctly, um, it's really the experiences and the expertise and the shared knowledge that I think enables the firm to deliver um, both strategic guidance and the follow through execution on that
Yep.
guidance, which is, I'm sure, somewhat uncommon and most certainly not commonly seen knocking at the door of that middle market layer that you seem to effectively play very well in. So, I think you're kind of bringing the full package, which is probably refreshing to them because they're either getting, as you say, a B or C or D level team from a big player, or I'm not so great or reliability from a smaller player. But you're kind of sitting in that just right position. So that's yet I'm wondering also if that was influenced by, not just overseeing this company, but Jared being an owner and investor yourself. Would you say that sitting at both sides of the table has helped shape that perspective and that vantage point that you're able to deliver clients?
I think that has single-handedly been one of the biggest differentiators for us when pitching our business to other people. Um, I mean, inherently, we are just trained to think differently. We are trained to think about this as a long-term investment. I don't want to put a band-aid on this. I want to fix this for good, right? And in that, I think kind of more, I want to say asset managerial focused mindset. You don't see as much of the like problem solution, problem solution, problem solution that you get from your typical property managers. You see somebody who's more of a thought partner, bringing that experience to them and saying like, look, we've been here before, right? I've seen a cycle like this. I've seen a tenant landlord issue or dispute like this before, right? Like I have done this. We have seen this because we own real estate. We own and manage our own real estate. And I have picked people, that work in our firm that come from those backgrounds and have those experiences, right? Everybody in our team has come from an owner managed company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or an owner's rep focused company. My mom was a transactional attorney for the buying part. Right? Everybody has that experience. And I think with that collective buy-in, you see the way that we approach even the day-to-day stuff that's like, clogged toilets and like, the not so glamorous side of property management. But the way that we approach that is actually looking for like a fix, a solution. Does this fit the client's investment strategy? Am I executing on what they want? And I think that's different. It's more asset management in a property manager than, trying to pack a property management into an asset management company. And when you approach
Mm-hmm.
real estate that differently, I think that you see a lot of different results. You see
Mm-hmm.
deals get done faster. You see, the performance just ends up being better.
Yeah.
Even in negotiating with like tenants, right? Like tenant comes to me, rather than going outside to find somebody else to like negotiate this with, like I can run numbers. We can run the analysis on it. And that's that hard, but most property managers kind of put their hands up there and say, well, what do you want us to do? Here's my variance report. Here's this. What do you think? It's different when you approach a client and you say, like, we've already dug in on this. I have, answers on why we blew variance by 5% or why we're under budget here. And, we've already gotten you all those answers because we think like we're an extension of your office. We're like an asset manager already for you. That has
Mm-hmm.
been one of the biggest differentiators for us. And I think one of the reasons why we keep winning business away from the traditional kind of third party property manager.
Nice, nice. So bringing it back to family again, a lot of times family business, it's more than just the physical or tangible assets. So let's talk legacy for a minute, because in addition to that, you're also taking on legacy expectations, history, and all of the responsibility that goes with it. So thinking about your own journey and where you're going, how do you strike the balance in your life and honoring, your mother, your father, and your grandfather's legacy while building something that is very reflective of your own unique vision?
Um, it, it's a lot. It's a push and pull a lot of times. You have to be respectful of what I think my grandfather had set out to do in a lot of ways. Again, I think we touched on this before. I'm not sure he had ever considered the fact that his grandson could be working on some of these buildings that he had built. I think his building of Dow and his businesses and Irish construction and some of these other things were like really from survival, right? Like he put himself through college. His parents died when he was really young, right? Like,
Mm.
and his story is really about surviving, right? Like he built this company to make money and to like, I'm not sure that he ever, and I wasn't there. And, I don't think that he had visions for this thing to become 4 generations from now. But now my mom and I are tasked with a responsibility that this exists. How are we going to build it better? And how are we going to leave it for the next few generations, right?
Mhm.
My goal is that, and that's been different in how I have to approach the day to day, right? Like they've already kind of accepted that and they have kids and they've kind of set this up as being a legacy for not just me, but my kids and their kids. And they've kind of accepted that. And that's how they approached building the company, right? I think I came in a little bit more cowboy and said, like, let's turn this thing into a REIT. Let's go, buy a bunch more properties. We take on $100 million more of, third party work. And I think that having somebody is being the gray hair, being the adult in the room and saying like, let's think about this. This needs to survive. This needs to, last has changed my perspective and how I approach just the day-to-day operations. My goal, and it's changed again from day one, is more about that legacy now. Like I think that when I'm no longer here or working on this, I want it to be something that somebody could step into, that there is no doubt in my mind, or in their mind, that this is how Herb would have wanted it to be run, and that's 3 generations from me, right? They should have the same core values that he built the original business on, that we're still working on and growing. We've now taken it and we're going to hopefully leave it with something better. But I want them to understand that that is still the core values that should govern that thing when I'm gone.
Nice.
And that's challenging. And that takes a
Yeah.
lot of buy-in from my parents, from my siblings, from my wife. Uh, you know, I, I think that they have to be bought into that too. And I think that our clients, not every client is going to fit uh,
Yeah.
that profile either, right? Like some clients are worth saying no to if they're not going to be the right thought partner for you. And we have an owned managed portfolio. I still have a responsibility to my third party clients, and working for them and being a steward for them in a lot of ways. And it's potentially, some of those clients that we have could be having the exact same conversations and thoughts on the assets that we are managing for them. They're thinking about how can this last their next few generations. So that's a better person for us to work with. That's a closer profile to what we are, where our expertise is, rather than maybe, say an investment group that wants to buy something, hold it for 3 years and flip it and get out of it, right? We might not be the best group for that, right? If you're
Right.
trying to, do that, I can send you to a couple other people, right? We want to be involved in this thought process and add a lot of different expertise and levels of, our own experience.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds very much like an alignment of vision and values, and that tends to be the guiding light for the best relationships for resolution.
Yeah, it doesn't always happen in practice with each other, right? The three of
Yeah.
us always have different opinions on what should we do with this business? How should we hire? How should we go after? What should we, think about? And there is always a push and pull with that. And it can be really tricky. It can dominate a lot of our family conversations. I think my sisters and their significant others and my wife are probably sick of listening to us talk about this around the dinner table at sometimes, but that's where I think it takes some buy-in from them too. Yeah, they're not here working in the day to day, but like at times I'm sure I sound like, or feel like the favorite child that gets to, be working with mom and dad and involved in all of that all the time.
Well, there's the visible stakeholders, and then there's the not so visible stakeholders. And in family governed businesses, you got a bit of both. And the takeaways from a lot of conversations on this program are they all kind of matter. They all
Absolutely.
kind of matter and they all have a voice. And then it's just about making sure that, as one guest put it very poignantly, speak your mind and do no harm.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, they're still family.
Absolutely. And it's funny actually, in the last couple of years, I've had a lot of really like intelligent, just deep conversations with my siblings, with my parents, obviously, and with my wife. And this might not be their world, right? Like they're none of them are involved in commercial real estate in their day to day. They both have, great careers and are very successful and have gone to higher education. But that perspective, that's different sometimes unlocks like a different way of thinking about things too.
Yes,
And
it
I
does.
like to think that, okay, my wife definitely doesn't, has never worked a day in commercial real estate in her life, but like a lot of what I do in the day to day is because of, maybe conversations that she and I were having. And same with my sisters, they're both super sharp. They are very interested in what we do. I'm not sure they want to take the calls when there's, property management issues. But they have a lot of really unique perspectives that are coming at it from a different way. And even for me, my mom and my dad, who are all born and raised in that, real estate mindset, having somebody else be like, well, why do you do that? And it might be obvious for us three, but it helps us think about it in a different way. And that's been really, you nailed it, or the other guest nailed it. I mean, it's refreshing to have a different perspective come in and add value in a different way.
For sure, for sure. So we touched on the subject that's shaping or reshaping, I should say, every industry right now, AI. And certainly commercial real estate seems to becoming increasingly more data driven. So when you look out to the next several years, Jared, where do you see technology creating the greatest opportunities, whether it be for owners, operators, investors, managers over the next several years? Where do you
Yeah.
see either whether it be AI or some other technology integration?
Yeah, real estate at its core is an information game. It's comps, it's finding out, who owns what, how much are they spending, what is the market dictating, what is, what's going on with the building down the street, how are their expenses? It's just an information game, right? And the more information you can collect, it helps you make a better decision. I think for us, Claude and ChatGPT, when we first started, didn't really exist in our day to day, and slowly it might have became much like some of your other guests or people that listen to the show, a way to refine an email or fix some stuff that they could just dump into and not have to. It's a good jumping off point, right? Into today, what I've seen it change for a small firm like ours that's only 12 people in the office, right? The ability to plug in, and we have it integrated into our Yardi system, into variance reporting, into our OneDrive, into our Teams messages, into our emails. The ability for it to take away the time and energy that we used to spend on finding something or just thinking about something, or like using it to put together a variance reporting dashboard, or like pulling all of our cash flow models together in one place, is unbelievable. I think we're just seeing like the tip of the iceberg in like what we can use it for as a small firm, but it's like having five more employees.
Yeah,
Being able to send them off and pull maybe five or six different cash flow statements or income statements from properties. And that was, done by hand. And we'd pull it off there and put it into Excel model. And obviously the Excel model had some formulas and all this stuff. But I mean, I can send, Claude Cowork through my OneDrive. I don't even have to pull it into Claude. I just say, go look in these file systems, pull down the variance reporting that accounting is already done for this month, highlight some of the places where we need to flag for conversations. Our variance reporting monthly conversations went from like 2.5 hours long, where we were digging in on every detail and going through this, to like now somebody can run a report on it 5 minutes after the accounting team sends out that variance report, and everybody already knows what they need to go track down for that meeting. And that meeting becomes 30 minutes because they already have pulled out all of the high level information. Now, it still needs to be checked, and we still need to add our own expertise and our
sure.
own, knowledge of whatever it is that we're working on. But it's just this incredible resource that's helped my team, like I can't even begin to explain it. And we're still trying to figure out like what are the best ways to, and every single day somebody coming in here and asking me, like, oh, Claude, help me do this, or like I have ChatGPT running this, and it starts another conversation with somebody else about, well, I didn't know I could apply it in this way for my department, and how can I use it there? And even in just pulling comps and like, searching the web for like apartment comps or apartment listings and all these other things, I talked to this guy a couple of years ago who had a company that was analyzing apartment buildings in New York, and it could take the Google Maps and the way that the sun, the trajectory and the arc of the sun to analyze which apartments in the building would get more sunlight, natural sunlight, than the other ones, and they could dynamically price those units because they had more light than some of the other ones. I mean, that's like that would have taken somebody walking around at different times of the day. They're like, okay, well, this one gets a lot of light, right? Like it's unbelievable the things that I think you're going to see it unlock in the next few years. And like I kind of joked about this at the beginning. I mean, I think my grandfather, I have hundreds of notebooks where he was doodling and writing all this stuff on here. And, I think now it's hard to join a Teams or Zoom meeting nowadays that doesn't have someone's note taker in it, like summarizing the entire, it's unbelievable. And I have it doing all the same funny stuff that I'm sure you guys and some of your listeners and other people have, which is like, summarize our team's messages from last week. What was the team talking about? What were some of the challenges that they had, and what did they decide how they were going to change it, you know, in those team's messages? Or go through my emails and tell me, what are the 10 things that I promised somebody I would get done this week? And like, how do I tackle those first, right? Like it helps you just become a better manager. It helps all of our departments run more efficiently. And it becomes for a team of 12, it's like having five more people. It's really incredible.
So, based on your adoption of AI into the day-to-day practice, are you predominantly the champion of that, or is it a collective? Like, do you find, because I know in some organizations, and this was probably, maybe one generation back, I'd hear CEOs, they would say the equivalent of like, okay, everyone, go learn and use AI. And that didn't really get it done. You kind of needed a champion and a coach to say, here's how we can
Yeah.
use AI. Talk about how it's showing up in your organization.
I am in by no way or means, at all well versed in this, right? I was a sport management major. I've been in real estate world. Like I'm used to the bricks and mortar and again, being in the day to day. So the technology piece of it was really a lot of like trial and error and talking to like colleagues or like other people that are in this world that can like, what are the best practices? How are you using it? How can we use it? And it's that trial and error. I've been
Mhm.
championing it more in our firm than anybody else. I think just being that it's closer to me and what I do in
Mhm.
that kind of asset management seat. I mean, if you think about though, like trying to push my mom too, who's used to reading every inch of the lease, right? Every dot, every comma, T, I, right? Like this is somebody who spent their entire career focused on the words and their meanings in this doc. To tell her to put a lease and put that into Claude and have it abstract it and tell you where, we can negotiate stronger. I mean, it almost killed her, right? Like she was like, no, this is what I'm here to do, right? But I was telling her like, how can we speed this up? At least abstracting gets faster. Loan document abstracting gets faster. Go through our file system and let us know where we're missing some things from this checklist when we're taking over a new property that we need to go find. Like it just helps speed everything up. There was a lot of pushback from our team in different respects of how to use it, right? I think a lot of ways they were using it just to clean up, emails, sound more professional. Some of the admin tasks
Mhm.
that they really didn't want to, spend a long time on. It helps you kind of cut through that a lot quicker. I think once you can show them what it's capable of doing, our accounting department has really leaned into it recently
Mhm.
for bank reconciliations or journal entrying or just the checks and balances, right? Of again, what used to be maybe one or two people's role of just going through a bank account and making sure that it all reconciles to the stuff that we have in Yardi can now be done and checked and, made sure it's done correctly. The accuracy is just so much faster. And like once they start to see that they can trust it a little bit more and like the prompt engineering of like, what am I putting in this, right? I think it was being used a lot like Google, and I think my dad still uses it a lot like Google in a way. Once you can kind of like show them that the more you put into it and the prompts that you put into it and the data that you put into it, you're going to get a lot more out of it. It really is like it's starting to learn about what we do right now. I don't have to tell it knows my property. It starts to recognize the properties. Now we haven't even touched on the underwriting aspect of it and what that's capable of doing. Lease analysis in terms of like how much TI, how much free rent, what are my commissions, what do I stand to make, what are these balance, these annual increases. Like, tell me how much I'm actually going to pull out of this. That can be done in 2 seconds. Yes, it's all math that every good asset manager should be able to do and can do, but running discounted cash flows, running your, just doing a quick back of the envelope, smell test on a building, is this a worth like is this something we want to invest in, right? Like that's done so much faster and it frees you up to get it's done in a way that is a jumping off point, but it frees you up to do more of that. Like, okay, now I can go add in my own expertise. I know that HVAC is going to cost way more than it thinks, so I'm going to add that in here. I have an
Hmm.
experience with a building down the street from here that I know that janitorial, you're never going to find somebody to do this for $5,000 a month. It's going to be more like 10, right? You start to add in those layers of your own knowledge and skill set, but it just pulls it all together so much faster. And the reluctance has gone away a little bit more. They're starting to
Hmm.
use it more. We're signing up, people for classes that are department focused, right? So a lot of these groups, like even Property Management Association and your ABC, American Builders and Contractors Associations that we're all part of, right? They have classes and they're starting to teach Yardi, which is our property management platform.
Hmm.
That's teaching classes now on like AI integration and how to use it for, those skill sets. And I think that will help them drill down on their departments and how they can really apply it. When you talk really high level AI, I think they kind of all like, fall asleep and they're like, whatever. When you can show them like real applications in their day to day, I think is where you start to see that reluctance go away.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you raised another important point. It's AI, but then there's an HI, there's a human intelligence uh,
Absolutely.
overlay and collaboration that interprets the AI, and now it creates more space and time for strategic reflection and
Yeah.
guidance and nuancing that sometimes the platform may overlook or miss. To your point, something that AI is saying, just because AI says it costs five, institutional knowledge tells you, nah, it's more like 10.
Yeah. Go find me that contract for 5 AI. If it
Uh,
does, I'll be out of a job.
so we touched on something about the broader family, your wife, sisters, another broader family. And I know right now you're involved in the business. They aren't directly, but do you envision any future other family involvement? Have those conversations been happening? And if so, how are you approaching those discussions?
None of them have threatened to join quite yet. No, I'm kidding. Who knows? I have no idea, right? Like,
Yeah.
again, I'm not sure that my mom ever thought that we would be business partners. I've shown an interest in real estate and obviously cared about it more so than maybe the other two did, and its core. But I started off as a sport management major, right? And I didn't think I'd ever be involved in real estate. I thought I was going to go, be the next big real sport agent, right? Blanking, Jerry Maguire, excuse me. I thought that's what I was going to do, and so I don't know. The conversations happen every day. I joked about it before. I'm sure in a lot of ways they feel like they being my sisters can feel like I'm probably like the chosen child. I can assure them that that is not the case, and it comes with a lot more challenges and responsibilities than I think that they think. It comes with a lot of nice perks. Working with your parents is an incredible perk. Um, but I don't know. I think in their involvement right now is in that listening and offering their opinion. And look, they stand as much to gain from our success as me or anybody else, right? Like I had the opportunity to actually work with my parents day to day, but I think that they are advisors in the framework of what this looks like in a lot more ways than they might think
Hmm.
and their perspectives. Whether we formalize a board or advisory or their more involvement, I don't know. It's something we talk
Hmm.
about a lot. If they wanted to, I'm sure that's something we would do. And they ask a lot of good questions now. Again, and my wife, I like to think that most of all, let me take this a different approach. All of the good things that I do probably came from a conversation with her. If it was something that I messed up on or was bad at, that was my own doing. I didn't consult her.
That's good to say in case she listens to
Yeah,
it.
exactly. But look, I mean, they have as much input on everything that we're doing. I mean, there's all conversations all the time, and that's where it dominates this. It's not a normal job where you step out of it and you kind of close your laptop and yes, you think about your job and the things you have to do, and it keeps you up at night. I'm not diminishing anybody else's roles or what they do in their careers. It's very different than when you have a call from your mom, and I have no idea whether she's calling me about how my dog's doing, how my wife's doing, about something we've got coming up, or if I forgot to send her a report. And that's it's tough, right? And it comes up in a lot of different ways. Um, I don't know. I don't know what their involvements will be. Their spouses are both, super intelligent people that have shown some interest, and I think they respect that it's a legacy and a family thing that,
Mhm.
might not be immediately their
Mhm.
involvement, but they're around there. I've asked them questions too. I've asked them for thoughts. My brother-in-law, from my middle sister, actually works in commercial real estate and is he general works for a large builder, general contracting company. So I've asked him a lot of different questions on how they do things. And again, he hasn't threatened to join quite yet, but who knows what the future holds. But I do hope that I don't have any kids yet, but I hope that some of them will be involved. I love the relationships I've built with my family from this. I hope they value those and think about them the same way. The opportunities that I got and the people that I've met have been incredible.
Mm.
I said in the beginning, the name and the reputation that I got to inherit being in Washington, being a third generation Washingtonian, being a kid of two people that have done this really well and for a really long time, it is unbelievable. And I hope my kids saying that too. But I've walked into a lot of networking events, I've run into a lot of, people in the commercial real estate world that have said like, I've worked with your parents, and that gives me an opportunity to, follow in that good reputation or good experience they had with them. They're more willing to give me an opportunity or a shot, I'm
Yeah.
sure, in a lot of ways.
That's awesome. And yeah, a number of takeaways in what you just shared. One, it would sound that your family, at the core, um, has and always maintains what I'll just call a very healthy line or lines of communication. And it's open and honest communication, and it's broadly speaking that
Yeah,
it's okay to communicate about business, even if you're at the dinner table. It's okay to have discussions. It's okay to have hard discussions. You know,
absolutely.
but it sounds like in your family, and something that's clearly you're carrying forward. Better to have them and not have than to not have them,
Yeah,
and better to be open and honest, and truthful than to swipe it under the rug.
yeah.
So that's great, and that's something not every family has, and it's something to be to cherish for sure.
It's hard. Think about it every time you've ever been frustrated with a boss or a coworker or something, and you want to put that away. Well, now you add in interpersonal relationships with your boss
Yeah.
being your mom or your dad, and your colleagues being your mom or your dad, and it becomes a very delicate art. Toes get stepped on. We don't always do it the best. We don't always do it the right way, and that can affect our personal relationship, and that's tough too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seeing the way that I will say though that they have been incredibly thoughtful and respectful in how they approached it and letting me kind of do my own thing within reins, not taking too big of risks or, not really going cowboy. But they've really let me kind of make those mistakes, go
Mhm.
through those challenges, be a voice of just help or support or whatever that is, without being overbearing. It doesn't, I joke that it dominates our family discussions a lot, but I think that they're respectful there too, right? Like I do think they make a concerted effort to really like separate life and work sometimes, especially for my siblings and for my wife, which I really appreciate. Um, it's not easy. You show up even for July 4th, which we were talking about before we started, airing. I worked down there for a couple of days, and I want to sneak away and go to the beach too and get away from work for a minute. And when you have your boss watching over your shoulder, it's you start typing a little faster. Busy work, busy work. No, but I really appreciate their effort that they've done in
That's
in
great.
making this a comfortable place to be.
Yeah, that's great. And you referenced Jerry Maguire in many ways. You are personifying Jerry Maguire just in a different way. Maybe your proposition to the middle market is help me help you, and
Yeah.
every day going about saying how, let's have a conversation and let's
Oh, I thought
figure
you were gonna
that
say, show me the money, Jerry.
out. That part of it too.
No, no, it's good.
That's for sure.
Closest I've gotten to my sport management degree, I think, so far was this conversation.
That's funny. So, as you look ahead 5 years, Jared, where do you hope Resolution Capital Management will be? Where would if you look 5 years out, or even further out, if your big vistage allows?
You know, I think I go back and forth. I wish in a lot of ways that I could be able to walk out my door and go sit with my grandfather and obviously understand, am I doing this the right way? Are we doing this the right way? What would you change? What do you see? And like, I'd also ask him, what do you think about the Giants this year and all those other great things and just having that relationship with him. But, I think in a lot of other respects, I already know that from my mom and my dad and their
Hmm.
experiences with him. And it was a challenge setting up this whole thing from the beginning and putting a lot of these processes and procedures in place. And every challenge that we've conquered and gotten to, there's another set of challenges, and it will always be like that.
Hmm.
So my goal is that I hope I hope they aren't restarting something in 5 to 10 years. But down the road, I think that I just want them to have the same core values. I want them to be involved in philanthropy. I want them to be active members of their community. DC is my hometown. I came back here because I love DC. I think working in real estate gives you a lot of opportunities to shape your neighborhood, to shape your town. Um, I love that feeling that I go to places and I get to touch and feel a place that my grandfather built. That's there long, long after he's gone. Now we've developed some stuff here in DC, which beyond just being able to shape the skyline and you know, all those kind of more like, okay, well, somebody's going to live here now, or a business will be here, and all those really nice things. I mean, this thing is going to be here. My wife is probably so sick of this, but we drive around everywhere, and I'm like, I built that, or I worked on this. I know the people that do that one. I know who owns that building. I know who's building this building over here, or do you know what that's going to be? And like, I don't care, but it it's so cool to be a part of your community in that way and seeing the trends. Where do people want to live? Why are they opening businesses here? What businesses are doing well? What are the trends of just like industrial or hospitality or anything? What pockets of the district are struggling or why? What are the demand drivers here? What is bringing people to live here? Right? Maybe not everyone is a Washingtonian. Maybe they work for the current administration or they don't or what, right? Like what
Yeah.
are those things? And to look at your neighborhood and look at your town from a different perspective, I think is really, really interesting. So shaping my town, shaping my neighborhood, working on potentially other legacy assets for other people where they're doing the exact same thing, and I'm helping with that vision. I think is really cool. More than anything, I want this to be here 3 generations past me. I want all of this hard work, all of this effort that my mom and I are doing to carry my grandfather's legacy to be here despite one of us not being here. I want this to be something that's plug and play and serving not just my family, but serving other people that are having those same conversations, serving those investors, serving those people that are thinking about, well, I want this to survive 3 generations. Here's your place to do that. Here's where you bring those assets, those investments, those strategies, and this will exist. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, hopefully not, someone will have this platform that exists and my core values will continue on. And those aren't my core values, those are my grandfather's core values, right? And
Mm.
that should carry on. And that I think will actually be the thing that I hope I leave with everybody else when this is gone. I don't know what it'll be called. It might not be resolution or Irish construction, but they can change the name, whatever they want.
But the values and the spirit of the institution, right, will endure. And I think that's
I hope.
a fine mark to leave on what you've built. Last question. If any of our listeners wanted to connect with you to learn more about your story or to learn more about Resolution Capital Management, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, we've got our website. I actually Resolution Capital Management is kind of our asset management and property management arm. We have our website. Irish Construction is my general contracting, repairs, maintenance, facilities arm, which was actually a nod to my grandfather and his last name, Iris, and his original company. We brought back the logo. I've got it tattooed, all that good stuff. But Instagram, LinkedIn, we're all over, and we're happy to have conversations. If we can be a thought partner, or just help you have the same conversations we're having, and we're here, and we greatly appreciate this platform, Ed, and I'm jumping out aside from this because I think giving people this platform not only helps me and other people honor the legacies. It's obviously great for our businesses to have reach and the scope and
Mhm.
broader demographic to hear our stories, but it helps us honor our grandparents' legacy or the generations before us and the legacies and preserving that and telling other people's stories. It also helps us think about things differently because we hear other people that have been on your show before that the way that they think about it. I might have a problem that, these other people
Yeah.
have had too. And I can't thank you enough for doing stuff like this. And this has been a really exciting journey. We talked about it a little bit before we started recording. Even just asking these questions and how my parents think I should be answering them, or how my wife thinks I should be answering them, or my sisters, it unlocked even more conversations that we've never had. And I thought I knew how they would want me to answer, and it was maybe different in a lot of ways. And it was a new perspective or a fresh look at a lot of things that we talk about every single day. So thank you very much.
Wow, thank you. That's so kind of you to say. I think we've just found the next spokesperson for Growing Up B2B. I think you said it better than I ever did, Jared. So
no, you did it for me in the beginning. So this is a really incredible platform.
Well, thank you. So to wrap things up here, Jared, what really stands out in your story, and it is very unique, is that not every family business transition begins with a thriving operating company. Sometimes it gets passed from one generation to the next in the form of reputation, or in this case, a collection of assets and a reputation, a set of values, and ultimately the responsibility to build something worthy of the family name. And that requires more than stewardship. It requires vision, in this case, entrepreneurship, and courage, which we didn't talk about, but the courage to create a new chapter while you honor the one that came before you. Jared, I want to thank you so much for sharing your journey, your story, and your perspectives. Again, we've been speaking with Jared Kassoff, Chief Operating Officer of Resolution Capital Management, and I'm your host, Ed Delia, and this has been another episode of Growing Up B2B. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Jared, thank you so much for sharing your story today.
Thank you very much, Ed. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning into Growing Up B2B. To explore more episodes and insights, visit podcast.delianet.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice. Having worked with hundreds of family-led businesses across my career, and being a second-generation leader myself, I'm on a mission to help every family business I meet achieve next-level growth for their organization. So feel free also to connect with me on LinkedIn, and let's support each other. You can also find out more about my company at delianet.com. Again, I'm your host, Ed Delia, and thanks so much for joining us today. Take care.